Nothing brings memories home like fragrance and music. You don't want to miss this one.
I finally found what I'm missing, and now you got all my attention. Driving me wild, got me wishing that you were all mine. You're irresistible, so refreshing. You're irresistible, tell the essence. Can feel your energy all over me. Close my eyes and I breathe in. You're irresistible.
What's up, fam? It's Cam and welcome back to CFR. So, if you guys remember, if you've been with me, long enough, you remember the first JUSBOX fragrance that was reviewed. It was Cheeky Smell. But when I was going through their fragrances, I actually wanted to review Black Powder. Now, I think it's probably a good thing that, I really felt like when I was, asking about the fragrances and reading like about the music, you've got Micro Love that is connected to U2. You've got Beat Cafe that is connected with Bob Dylan. But of course, even though those stories don't necessarily, smell like the fragrance, they do have cool stories, to build up the story behind the fragrance. So Black Powder was one that I was really interested in because of the grunge scene, because of Nirvana especially. So I think the lady at Your Perfumes was like, dude, that one's not for everyone. And to be honest with you, and I've mentioned before, leather fragrances were not my thing for a while. And I'd like a little one here, I'd like a little one there, but this one is special, and I absolutely hated it the first time I smelled it. If you're looking to sample any JUSBOX fragrances, especially Black Powder or any other ones, check www.perfumology.com or look up Near Guy on Facebook. He's the owner. He and his family own Perfumology. They are in a new store in downtown Philadelphia. Go check them out if you're ever in Philly, and they have an amazing assortment of fragrances. Near is also a fan of JUSBOX, so he and I love getting together and talking about JUSBOX. Great guy. They have amazing sample deals where, you can just rake up on samples. Definitely check with them on that. So before I get into the fragrance, let me just tell you how the grunge scene and Nirvana affected me. I grew up, in the 80s as a small child, and we had, all the big hair bands. We had Motley Crue, we had Rat, we had, Ozzy Osbourne, Cinderella. That's when it really started getting into the super glam rock. Of course, it was Iron Maiden were, the Brits that had the fast galloping and all that. And Metallica was also there, but really the ones who ran the complete scene were the big hair bands. Like I was talking about, Motley Crue, Cinderella, and then you had the real pretty boys that were Warrant and Poison. They were at the top of the game, at the end of the 80s. And Warrant especially, I think they were the biggest. So I remember on MTV, seeing how the grunge scene just basically threw the brakes up on all of that. Warrant had their Cherry Pie poster up in the recording studio, or where their agents were at or whatever, and they came back off a tour in Japan and saw Alice in Chains' Dirt on there, and they're like, oh shh.
When we released the record Cherry Pie in the office of Columbia in New York, over the president's desk, his secretary's desk actually, there was a huge poster of Cherry Pie. And then when we were going to release the next record, I did the exact same trip to New York to talk with Donnie. And over his secretary's desk was a huge poster again, only this time it was Alice in Chains' Dirt.
So they knew something had changed, but what had happened is the Seattle scene had been doing their thing. It was all about rebellion. It was all about, more parents were not being at home with their kids, so kids were, just clinging to different people. There was a lot of, depression. There was a lot of, because you think about like the Seattle scene being rainy, and, some of the music was, kind of dreary, but in a good way.
And we started hearing this drony kind of depressing but very socially relevant kind of music coming out of Seattle.
Soundgarden came from that. Alice in Chains came from that. And then you had like spin-off bands like Mad Season, Temple of the Dog, Pearl Jam. I remember the first time that I listened to Pearl Jam, somebody stuck their CD in my locker and put a note on there like, dude, you need to listen to this, it's gonna change your life. And Pearl Jam 10 is like one of the most iconic albums. But of course, Nirvana seemed to be kind of like paving the way. Smells Like Teen Spirit was like the anthem for Gen X.
I think that the turning point from metal ruling the world into grunge ruling the world was the song Smells Like Teen Spirit.
And even though, like these guys were so iconic, especially like Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam and Kurt Cobain from Nirvana, like out on the stage, they were bigger than life, but like in reality, they did not like all the attention. They didn't like all the focus on them. It was just about friends and music. So I know you're like, how the hell does this have to do with Black Powder? Well, I think they were talking about, like when you think about how Kurt Cobain supposedly died, he supposedly died of a shotgun blast to his head that that was self-inflicted. I never believed that. I still don't believe that. There are documentaries about it that lead to think that Courtney Love had something to do with that, and I fully believe that if she did not do it, she had it done.
My name is Tom Grant. I was hired by Courtney Love to find her missing husband, Kurt Cobain.
Or you can watch a documentary that's called Stained in Bleach.
Nirvana frontman Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain.
Is dead.
Hiring me is not like hiring an attorney. It's not to protect you. My job is to find the truth.
It actually has accounts from a PI that Courtney Love hired, and he was like, some things aren't gelling up. So I remember like Kurt Cobain was so happy, like his daughter was born. He had planned on leaving Courtney Love, and had he done that, that only would have left $30,000 to her. Now she owns all the rights to Nirvana, which is worth over $1 billion. I spent one rainy Saturday afternoon at Barnes & Noble's, and I read Kurt Cobain's diary, and then it had the last page that was supposedly his suicide note. Just to my eye, and I'm not like a penmanship expert or anything, it did, like at the very end where it starts talking about suicide, does not look like his penmanship. The amount of heroin that was in his body was not even, like he wouldn't even have the ability to take a shotgun and blow his brains out.
I cannot think of a case in which someone inject himself with a large amount of heroin and then proceed to kill himself. It just doesn't make sense.
All of his credentials were laid out real neat and everything. So interesting enough, I never believed it. And then, I remember seeing something on Unsolved Mysteries about it. And then the documentary about it came out. So if you're interested in stuff like that, there's a nice, cool backstory to my new favorite leather fragrance. And as I said, I absolutely hated this thing. I got some of these samples of the whole entire JUSBOX line. I actually got some from Alan over at Beverly Hills Perfumery. My brother got some from Alan, and my brother hated this one too. He gave me all of his, so I actually had a few of these, and I kept like leaning towards them. This is an extremely well done leather fragrance. It is the #1 selling JUSBOX fragrance in Europe. You're really gonna have to give this one a chance though, because it does open up with like a blast of pepper. Let me read the notes on this. This is like unique to me. You got blackcurrant, crisp apple, pimento, suede, tobacco leaves, frankincense, sandalwood, tonka beans, and patchouli heart. So yeah, it sounds weird. And like if you read on Fragrantica, you're gonna see some really negative and polarizing reviews about it. But if you like unique leather fragrances, the suede note in here is there. You can actually smell that apple and frankincense in this. The dry down on it is amazing. It gives off a great scent bubble. The sillage is fantastic. Performance is 9-10 hours easily, maybe more. This just is fantastic, especially like in the colder weather. You get a nice cold brisk day. It almost comes off a little bit woodsy, as people smell you, because I think it's like New Year's Day. My wife and I are divorced, but we do co-parent. We do occasionally do things with our son, and New Year's Day, I had this on, and we went to go cheer some elderly people up at a home. And as I got in the car, she was like, "You smell really woodsy today." So it does kind of give off that, especially like when you first put it on, but that leather note in here is fantastic. And as you know, some of those leather notes are put together by different types of woods and florals and everything, but amazing. An amazing story about an amazing musician taken from us way too soon. And the music of Nirvana will never, ever be forgotten. And, throw a leather jacket on, throw some Nirvana on, blast you some black powder on, but don't have any black powder in a bullet or nothing like that. I don't know if that's what they were going for. If that's the case, I think that's like, I don't like that, because it was, it took an awesome guy away that I honestly believe did not take his own life. If you guys are fans of leather fragrances, or if you're a fan of grunge music, what's your favorite grunge band? What's your most iconic memory? If you guys will remember, like Eddie Vedder would always just like get higher and higher and higher and jump off of things into the audience. Some of the, like Alice in Chains Unplugged, that's one of the most iconic concerts ever. Of course, Soundgarden, you've got Chris Cornell, who was also taken from us too soon, who was the lead singer for Audioslave, which was Rage Against the Machine, and basically like Audioslave was Rage Against the Machine and Soundgarden, kind of, sort of. And then of course Nirvana, the spinoff from that is Dave Grohl's band, Foo Fighters. So lots of great musicians come from that era. That's all near and dear to my heart, and this fragrance is near and dear to my heart as well. Until next time, be disruptive, wear what you want, when you want, have fun. Make sure that you subscribe to Carolina Fragrance Reviews, activate that notifications bell, smash that like button, leave us some comments down below. We'll see you next time on Carolina Fragrance Reviews.